good morning. The questions today are activists being effective, and is the governing body composed of spiritual men? Now, there are three reasons for this channel. One is to warn Watchtower that their activity is unscriptural. Secondly, to try to rebuild the faith of us who have had our faith destroyed by Watchtower. And thirdly, to demonstrate that God has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with Watchtower's unscriptural policies. That's most important. It's one thing to organise a worldwide preaching work to get the good news spread, but it's completely another thing to make all these man-made rules to govern the people who do it. That's not what Jesus had in mind. As it says in 1 Corinthians 4 and verse 18, just a second, I'll just find that. 1 Corinthians 4, and verse 18. When it seemed that I was not coming to visit you, some of you became self-important. Not a good thing, no. To evaluate Watchtower then, what do we have to do? Well, I'll read this from Barclay's translation. It's in 1 Corinthians again, chapter 2, and this time verses 15 and 16. The man who has the Spirit can rightly evaluate everything, and he himself is subject to no man's judgment. So a spiritual person can evaluate what someone else is doing, and he himself can only be evaluated by someone else who is spiritual. You can't be evaluated by people who are not spiritual. But how do we become spiritual? Paul goes on to quote scripture, "Can anyone know the mind of the Lord? Can anyone instruct him? But we do have the mind of Christ." Now that's important. The mind of Christ needs to be our mind. So how do we go about that? Well, if we go to Ephesians, and I think I've lost the page, Ephesians chapter 3, and this time I'm reading from verses 16 to 20, but it's talking about the Christ living in our hearts through faith, so that with all the saints we have the strength to grasp the breadth, the length, the height, and the depth. So when we look at a matter, we won't just look at one aspect of it, we will look at every aspect. We will consider the mind of Christ as it pertains to that particular aspect of a matter. So let's just have a look at a couple of Watchtower's activities that they base on one chapter, one verse in the Bible, and most of all it's their judicial system. They've based it on the two-witness rule. Ignoring all the other rules, judges must not be prejudiced. They must investigate thoroughly, even the witnesses who come along, and so on and so forth. If all you need is two witnesses, why do you need to investigate thoroughly? There's no point, is there? You've got your two witnesses, that's the end of the matter. But God says no, investigate the matter. Does Watchtower do that? No. Jesus said in John chapters 5 and 8 that evidence is a witness. So Watchtower has not taken that on board. Why not? Because they're not spiritual people. Now, activists have brought Watchtower's attention to this matter, and at long last, Watchtower is now embodying evidence in some of their judicial systems. It's too late, and it doesn't go far enough. But activists are helping. On another matter, there's the verses about not taking your brother to court. Now, Watchtower bases everything on that. They go to court regularly, so long as even if you're one of their brothers. But then they haven't taken into account Romans 13, which states that the governments are God's minister to deal with crimes. Now, if Watchtower had been spiritual, they would have recognized this years ago, and then young people would not have been harmed so much. They could have gone to the governments for help with their criminal matters. So, dear ones, what do we do about this? Well, the activists have helped there. They have brought this to Watchtower's attention, and once again, at long last, Watchtower is taking on board that the government is God's minister. So where does that leave us? Well, we need to become spiritual people. Sorry. So what I would like you to do is to start a little project and read through one of the Gospels, or all of them. And after each passage, say to yourself, what is the mind of Christ in this matter? Why did Jesus do this? Why did he feed the hungry, heal the sick? Why did he heal the sick on the Sabbath to needle the scribes and Pharisees? Why did he eat with sinners? We need to understand the mind of Christ in these matters to get a broad view of any issue that arises, because we need to stand on our own feet now, and I will encourage you to do that, to build your faith as strong as possible, so that you don't rely on any other person apart from Jesus Christ and Jehovah God. Don't rely on me, rely on the scriptures. So in the future then, I might start looking at one of the Gospels. I have another issue I'd like to look at first, but we'll look at that later on. But thank you for watching, and thank you for your patience this morning.